Mega Agenda 21 resurrected with Pope's help. As the choppy waters of September 2015 move ashore, all eyes will be on Pope Francis' visit to the United States, jittery stock markets and signs in the heavens. Francis is expected to enthusiastically endorse a new UN document that promises to wipe out poverty by 2030 by reordering the world economy along the lines of socialist principles. The document, titled Transforming Our World 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, also seeks to strengthen universal peace and usher in a new era of shared prosperity. The Pope's visit marks just one in a series of historic and potentially prophetic events during the month of September. The climax of the biblical Sabbath year known as the Shemitah occurs on September 13th, along with a partial solar eclipse. The largest ever military exercise, Jade Home, concludes September 15th, while the world's most ambitious scientific experiment is taking place all month at the CER in Large Hadron Collider near Geneva, Switzerland. Congress is supposed to vote on Obama's Iran nuclear deal by September 17th. The 266th Pope arrives on September 23rd, the 266th day of the year, which also happens to be Yom Kippur, or the Jewish Day of Atonement, and the beginning of the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, also known as the Feast of the Sacrifice. Francis will be the first Pope to address a joint session of Congress September 24th. Francis delivers the keynote speech September 25th to the UN Sustainability Summit in New York. On September 28th, the fourth and last of the blood moons takes place on the biblical Feast of Tabernacles. Short of a global economic collapse, the UN's rollout of its new Agenda for Sustainable Development could have the most far-reaching impact of all these events. See all of Jonathan Cahn's books, movies, and teachings in one place. Basically, they are rebooting Agenda 21, said Tom DeWeese, president and founder of the American Policy Center, and they are calling on the world's most visible religious leader to promote the agenda. The UN 2030 Agenda includes 17 goals that aim for the reordering of all human activity. Despite the failure of Agenda 21 to end poverty, the Pope and the UN will ask 193 national leaders to go home from the September 25th to 27th summit and promote the new UN plan to usher in its planned global utopia, DeWeese said. These same NOs who failed to end poverty through Agenda 21 are headed to New York City to announce their new 2030 agenda to transform the world, he said. The preamble to the document says all countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. But unlike 1992, when nobody was paying much attention as Agenda 21 was rolled out at the UN Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, all eyes will be on the Pope as he sings the praises of the new UN plan on September 25th, DeWeese said. DeWeese and others expect a massive promotional campaign to combat climate change. That's where the Pope comes in. He will wrap the sustainability principles in the verbiage of social justice and helping the poor, perhaps even citing Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, encouraging other world religious leaders to follow his lead in embracing the UN prescription for mankind. The overthrow of capitalism. But what is sustainable development? Patrick Wood, an economist and author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, says it's clear the UN and its supporters see sustainable development as more than just the way to a cleaner environment. They see it as the vehicle for creating a long-sought new international economic order, or New World Order. Wood's new book traces the modern technocracy movement to Zbigniew Brzezinski, David Rockefeller, and the Trilateral Commission in the early 1970s. Wood says their goal is the overthrow of capitalism and the free enterprise system on a global scale. He points to Christiana Figueres, the UN's top climate change official, who admitted as much in a comment earlier this year. This is probably the most difficult task we have ever given ourselves, which is to intentionally transform the economic development model for the first time in human history, Figueres, who heads up the UN's Framework Convention on Climate Change, told reporters in February. This is the first time in the history of mankind that we are setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for the at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, Figueres said. Francis, as the first Jesuit Pope, is well known for his socialist leanings. His statements in his encyclical about the need for global governance to combat climate change must be looked at in the context of the Pope's background and announced priorities. A new world order based on socialism. Author Tom Horn points out that Father Malachi Martin predicted in his book The Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, and the Betrayal of the Roman Catholic Church what might happen if a Jesuit ever gets control of the Vatican. Tom Horn, as a Jesuit himself and a longtime Vatican insider, Martin, who died in 1999, had hoped that what he predicted would never come to pass, but it is becoming apparent that his predictions are playing out exactly as he feared they would, Horn said in a recent commentary on Skywatch TV. He said there was a secret war between the Jesuits and the other Catholic priests to take control of the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican in particular, Horn said. Traditionalists such as Cardinal Raymond Burke have been demoted by Francis. Horn believes the Pope's recent encyclical on climate change and the reshuffling of key Vatican leaders may have something to do with what's about to occur on the global stage. Check out the blockbuster documentary film, The Last Pope, bundled with Tom Horn's book Petrus Romanus about the final days of the papacy. 130514 Petrus Romanus cover Malachi Martin said the Jesuits would use the Vatican because it's not like any other Christian denomination, Horn said. It's got 90 ambassadors parked there on any day. It's got political relationships with most of the nations of the world, and Malachi said that's why the Jesuits wanted to seize control of the Vatican, so they could use it as a machine. He said that would give assistance to the rise of a new world order, and he very specifically said they would use it to do the things that Pope Francis is doing now in world order based on socialism, Marxism, and that they would work in tandem ultimately with the rise of the Antichrist for the implementation of the objectives of the Antichrist. If they succeed in doing away with capitalism, which Figres openly stated was the goal, the question is, what will replace it? I say it's technocracy, Wood said. They say it's the green economy and sustainable development. But regardless of what you call it, the UN plan calls for a centrally managed economy, more regulations of human activity, less freedom, he says. If the world continues on this trajectory, we will lose everything that sustains any semblance of individual liberty and freedom, he said. Someone else will decide what to manufacture, how much to make, who, and how much an individual may purchase, and at what cost. Someone else will tell you where you can work, for how long, at what wage. Someone else will tell you where you can live, how big it will be, how many children you can have, and where you will send them for indoctrination. There will be no private property rights, no ability to pass wealth to your children. Facing out national sovereignty. In the summary of the High-Level Political Forum of Sustainable Development, that came up with the 17 goals to be implemented by 2030, it clearly states that member nations will be expected to make constitutional amendments and creation or adjustments of institutions to implement the goals. Martin Sojdik, president of the UN Economic and Social Council, states, in a summary, that governments must respond with policies that support individuals throughout their life course and promote non-discrimination and inclusivity, with adequate attention given to marginalized and disadvantaged groups, including children, youth, the old, women, indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities and migrants. The UN is calling for a massive propaganda campaign, at all levels, to bring its transformative global agenda into being. It even has a slogan, leave no one behind. Sojdik in his summary describes how UN Agenda 2030's goals will be promoted, extending into social media, traditional media, and even embedded in every nation's pop culture through music and art. Communication should aim to make people understand how they personally contribute to the global agenda and to feel proud of this. It will be important to project that this is a universal agenda with a much greater level of ambition than one could have imagined a few years ago. The motto, leave no one behind, is also a powerful vehicle for mobilizing people. It can be a two-way street and be used to collect data on what people want and to create feedback loop. The agenda should be communicated through social media, and traditional civil society mobilization techniques as well as art, music, and culture. Communication will have to happen in all countries and at all levels, down to the local grassroots level where implementation takes place. It needs to reach all groups and to be tailored to various countries and groups. It is also good to identify and target trendsetters in various communities. While a small cadre of activists are poised to expose the UN 2030 agenda as a war against national sovereignty and the middle class, the vast majority of Americans are completely unaware of the UN's plan to reorder society and transform the global economic system. There has been virtually no coverage of the 2030 agenda in the establishment media to date, but Wood says to get ready for a barrage of media indoctrination that appeals to emotional themes like world poverty and income inequality. The people are so unaware of the magnitude of this, Wood said. Agenda 21 was introduced as a voluntary program, very innocuous, where all their apologists said, we didn't force it on you, so what's the harm? In reality, very little about Agenda 21 turned out to be voluntary. Expect the same with the 2030 agenda. It's been implemented from the top down. And, very cleverly, the spend they put on it is unbelievable, Wood said. Instead of wiping out poverty, the elimination of plentiful coal and forced greening of the economy will drive more people into poverty, Wood believes, as utility rates soar, and private property becomes the sole domain of the super wealthy. Anyone who protests will be branded as a conspiracy theorist or worse. This is a process that has been mastered by the left since the 1970s and 1980s, when the elite started using Hollywood to sell their agenda. It reminds me of the skit they did in 1981 on the Barney Miller Show on the Trilateral Commission, Wood said. It was hilarious, but it was complete misinformation, branding anyone who would talk about it as an idiot. Where did that little hit piece come from and work its way into a Barney Miller segment? The message came out, you bring this up, and you deserve to be in jail. Wood was at the time trying to market his 1979 book, Trilaterals Over Washington, co-authored with Dr. Anthony Sutton of the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. The book was boycotted and never saw the light of day on the shelves of major bookstores. So he expects similar attacks on anyone who exposes the truth about UN Agenda 2030. They put out the spin, and that's what people remember, he said. They clearly have got the upper hand at this point, and I think awareness is the key. We have to hammer it and call it for what it is, and maybe we can change the spin. If they win, they will shut us up. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon appointed 27 eminent persons to the so-called High-Level Political Forum, which came up with the 17 goals and 169 targets. Only one American was appointed, former Clinton Chief of Staff and trilateralist John Podesta, who also served as Obama's top climate change advisor and now is managing Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. The 29-page document will be up for a vote of the General Assembly at the September 25th to 27th summit. There will be lots of smokescreens to keep people's attention away from this, Wood said. What they intend to do, I believe, is to have a presentation of the document. They will have a lot of people say a lot of good things about it, but it will not be open for discussion. You will not be able to add to it or change it, but they will have speakers, like the Pope, say this is great and needs to be approved, Wood said. The idea is to get every nation on the planet to sign on to the outcome and say they will commit to do these things. Congress forced to go along? And, just like it did so effectively with Agenda 21, the UN will again stress that there is no legally binding mechanism for Agenda 2030. That means it's not a treaty, but it is a politically binding document. Agenda 21 wasn't legally binding either, it was politically binding. The difference is subtle. Political leaders, like Obama, will use a politically binding document to browbeat Congress and tell them if you do not follow this you will devastate our reputation on the world stage. Congress will say, we didn't sign any legally binding agreement on this, but the president will say, it doesn't matter. I signed it, and you will carry it out. It's like what he's doing with the Iran deal right now. The Republican leadership will likely side with Obama, marginalizing those members in the House and Senate who object. If Congress doesn't go along with Obama on this, do you know what he's going to do? He's going to go straight to the EPA and tell them to tighten the screws, and we'll just meet these goals and target ourselves through regulations. We'll complete the kill-off of the coal industry. We'll refuse tax-exempt status for anyone who tries to resist us. Obama will tell them, look, I made a politically binding agreement on this. You can't back out, and regardless of what you decide, I'm going to carry it out. And Congress is left neutered. Impotent. Like they have been on everything else he has done. Wood expects Republicans such as Jeb Bush, Chris Christie, Marco Rubio, and many of others running for president would, if elected, follow through with implementing the 2030 agenda. At this point, there will be zero chance, except that you literally disband these agencies, like the EPA, because you can't get rid of these technocrats. They have incredible power, Wood said. This is the problem people don't understand. Who is really wielding the power today? Most Americans believe it's Congress. But they don't. Even a new president coming in cannot go in and selectively remove these career bureaucrats. They are civil servants, some were hired by Reagan. The only candidate who promised to close entire agencies such as the EPA and Department of Education was Ron Paul. He was the only one who promised that. It would have been almost like civil war in every direction if he had been elected, Wood said. It would be tough. It would not just be a stroke of the pen. It would be very hard, but it could be done. Awareness is the big thing here. And if the people don't finally figure out what a big scam this is, we're in trouble.